city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years. City of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years. Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey Lab. The city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years. Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey Lab. The city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years.
Welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab.
Hello and welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab. My name is Adrian Hernandez. I am here today with a full cast of characters. I got Ezra Parter, Meghan Angley, Evan Liu, Jackie K, and Brennan Vogt. It is an honor and a privilege to be with the five of you today to talk Colorado Avalanche hockey. And with those of you who are tuned in live, thank you so much. Please head on over to our website, milehighhockey.com, where you can find all of our written material, recaps, preps, all the good stuff, opinion pieces, anything you might be curious about. And of course, please look us up on your preferred Spotify platform, or podcast platform. It might be Spotify, and add our full catalog and download some episodes if you're interested in that sort of thing. But we got a lot to talk about and plenty of people to talk today. So let's just get right into things. I'll just give you a quick little rundown on what we will be doing today. We will introduce Meghan to the program for the first time. We will do a quick recap and reaction to the games that have come and gone so far last week. Talk a little bit about Sam Alinsky, Cale Makar, Jonathan Drouin, a little bit about the game yesterday, and then we will preview Jets, Bruins, Rangers, and Islanders, all to come this week between now and our next show. So let's drop the puck. Meghan, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's really an honor and a privilege to have someone as esteemed as you on our program.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk hockey with you all.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just before we get into all the hockey stuff, I just want to maybe see if you can give us an update on kind of some of the fun stuff you've been working on lately, maybe that some people might not be totally aware of, and just give us a little bit of background on your time covering the Colorado Avalanche and beyond.
Yeah, I made a switch over this off season, so I'm at a media outlet now called Guerilla Sports, and a lot of that content can be found on their Guerilla Sports YouTube channel, guerillasports.net. And we're actually in the process right now of building up the website component and adding some more written content. So there is a piece coming sometime next week that talks a little bit about how the Avs use analytics to help players that are struggling get out of a bit of a rut.
Wonderful. That's something that we over here at Mile High Hockey, we like to nerd out a little bit. So that's right up our alley. And that is something that I'm very excited to see. So I'll be on the lookout for that. Now let's get into a little bit of the insight that you offer being in the room at times and stuff like that. So I'm curious, as just kind of the fan, how have things shifted since the arrival of Mackenzie Blackwood? Do you feel like the room has changed in terms of optimism or focus at all?
It's changed in a big way. I want to say Evan Wall of the Gazette had a piece recently about how the locker room was really tight-knit in that 2022 Cup season and how it feels as close as ever kind of compared to that year. And That was a little bit of a weird year. There were still COVID protocols in place, and so I wasn't in the locker room quite the same way they'd pull players to the podium. But what I will say is, this is the first time I've personally been able to see the locker room as tight-knit as it is, and it is on the heels of both the goaltender trades between
Right.
Wedgwood and now Blackwood. There's so much levity in the room. They're cracking jokes and yapping at each other across the way every practice, and even when they've been difficult practices, they find a way to make some jokes about it. So it's been a huge difference in the locker room and the feel of it overall.
That's honestly great news, because I think that's an interesting thing in terms of the levity of the room. It's always you're always likely to have more success when you're having more fun at work, and it sounds like the Avs are having a little bit more fun at work. So thank you for that insight. But Evan, I'm curious. We're talking about Mackenzie Blackwood, who, although the Avs weren't able to win, had a pretty stellar performance against the Wild. And also got his first reality check, so to speak, in a loss to Edmonton, where the Avs gave up 4 unanswered, had a 3-0 lead. It was pretty rough. My takeaway from that was, Edmonton, a little bit like Colorado, is never quite out of a game via their scoring talent. Is that your takeaway as well?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you have Connor McDavid on your team, I feel like that's just a recipe for success, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one that took him to Game 7 last year against Florida. So, but at least on the Blackwood side of things, I mean, he, I guess we'll say, for lack of a better term, has fallen back to earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if this is the low, hey, don't mind it one bit, right?
Yeah.
And I know we talked about it last week too, where we've seen his potential, we've seen what he's capable of, but we haven't quite seen, kind of just the average, like where he's at usually, right? And if this is where he's at usually, I'm cool with it, right? He just needs the supporting act to kind of help around him, right? And I think that's just kind of where the Avs have faltered the last couple of games. That Edmonton game was great for 18 minutes, right? You had Nathan McKinnon, just absolutely lighting everybody up, including fellow Evan Bouchard. But I mean, you need guys outside of those two to help you out, right? I think that's just kind of something that has kind of been a struggle for them the last few games. They should be getting help soon with Nichushkin coming back, hopefully. If the likes of Ivan keep performing, or I guess turn up their performance, because I know that has been an issue as of late. I had to check last night if he was playing. He played 3 minutes, and I was just like, "Ooh, boy!" But nonetheless, Blackwood.
It's funny, either way, last year your name was going on the cup for the first time ever, right? Between Evan Bouchard and Evan Rodriguez, and I guess Rodriguez is the one that it ended up being.
Evans
But
represent, baby.
Happily, yeah. Well, you mentioned struggles, and we talked a lot about last week. We talked a lot about Casey Middlestat and his struggles and how that might lead to a potential trade at the deadline, yada, yada, yada. But Jackie, as is per tradition, quoting Brennan there, Casey Middlestat in the second line just absolutely goes off. You were kind of pounding on the table in our last week episode that, well, he hasn't played with a lot of consistent talent. Is that what we saw? And do you think that sort of success is sustainable? Maybe not 10 points in a single game, but you know where I'm going.
Oh, well, he had plenty of good line mates. I mean, he spent the bulk of the season with Rantanen and Nichushkin, so it wasn't quality of line mates, but it was that the only player that he's ever really had analytic success with is Lehkonen, and they really didn't seem that interested in going there. So Benner talks about analytics a lot, so I can't imagine that he hasn't seen some sort of report on that. So that was really the first game I think that combination was given a chance, and especially with Drouin there, that was an interesting group. But I mean, yes and no. I'll be interested to see what the lines look like with Nichushkin back, and knock on wood, nobody else leaving. But it just doesn't seem like to this point they're very interested in really catering to constructing things really to the benefit of Middlestat. It's just kind of like everything's to benefit the top line, and then he's just expected to work with whatever remains. So I do think to get the best out of him, they have to shift in thinking, and they really have to try to actively construct a line that is going to help him the most. And I mean, it's great that they found the magic for one game, but in yesterday's game, that group was 20% expected goals together. So, so it's not going to work. I'm not going to say it didn't work, but it's just not like, oh, aha, we found it. Like, this is it. It's going to take a lot of work for a second line on this team to consistently provide offense, to consistently be trusted, and to be able to stay together. So it was like one great night, and it was maybe that gives Bednar the the confidence to put him more with Lehkonen, but it's still a long, long, long road ahead to being able to figure it out consistently.
Totally. And that's interesting because my next question is for Ezra, and you set it up perfectly, Jackie, because you said it was one great night. And my question for you, Ezra, is does a solid performance like that make him more valuable inside the system or more valuable in an inevitable trade in your mind? Because like with the comings and goings and the hots and cold streaks with him, with the cold streak being much longer than the hot streak so far, are you kind of already sold on it not being a good fit? And does his good performance just kind of add value to him in a potential trade?
Well, I'm not sold on it being not a fit. You said inevitable trade. I know that was not you're saying that they're definitely going to trade him away, and I would disagree with that. I think that it's true that it was one good night, but it also is true that it's a night that shows you what he can be, and if he can get back to that, because he was that for, I would say, the first like 30 to 50 games of his Avalanche career, he was that guy, and it hasn't worked for the last 20 or 30, or I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it hasn't worked so far this season, right? For large stretches of the season. But it has worked for large stretches of his Avalanche tenure. So I don't think that he's necessarily on the way out. I think he's the guy who has to reclaim his game if he's going to be able to stick around. And I I was a big proponent of trading for him, so I'm hoping it works out.
I'm with you there. I wrote inevitable trade because I think that that's kind of where some fans have gone. But I'm with you. I think that he's got enough, at least enough left in a leash to try and bounce back this season, and do what he can, especially like in the NHL and for a team like the Colorado Avalanche. I think the playoffs are the real proving ground, and they kind of work through their struggles throughout the season. But Brennan, why don't you give me a round out on that conversation we just had, maybe touch on a couple things, and then give me an Eagles update, and then I guess sort of disappoint us all with an injury update?
Well, we haven't even gotten Megan's opinion on this yet, but because she's going to know the best out of everyone. But I think it's consistency of line mates. He hasn't had a consistent set of line mates. First off, he finally got Rantanen to play with him. Well, not really finally, but. It's just the fact that he hasn't had consistent line mates is the key part. And then I'll toss it off to Megan on this one.
Yeah, Megan, what are you seeing in the Casey Middlestat situation? And kind of what are you if you have any rebuttals to kind of what's been said already?
No, I'm pretty much in agreement with everyone's assessment. I think for him, finding consistency has obviously been an issue, and not having consistent line mates lends itself to that. I think the bigger issue is a confidence problem with Casey Middlestat. He starts the year with a rotating cast of line mates to include Cal Ritchie at times and Kovalenko at times, and I think he thrived there because his game was operating a little bit more on instinct at that time. That's also about...
Uh-oh. Oh, she dropped.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, we lost her. She was giving
I have an idea of where she's coming from, because I know we touched on it last week about the consistency of Middlestat and just like having a lack of it. And I remember touching on last week anyway with the playoffs. When he was in the playoffs and he was connecting with like Lehkonen, like those two were practically unstoppable, right? Like Casey would find Lehkonen in front, and it was just like pass after pass, play after play. Like he was spectacular, right? It was a great honeymoon phase. I know we talked about that last week too, so we're just kind of rolling back the week, but it's just a matter of him getting consistency and that confidence, like Megan said. And I'm looking at Jay Fresh's post that he made about Casey Middlestat just a few days ago.
My favorite.
And kind of this, I know, right? And this kind of sort of,
I only requested it like 3 times.
Yeah, I know.
Like this sort of, I guess, downward turn that he's had, right? I also didn't realize he's $5.8 million for 3 years. That's less than Mackenzie Blackwood is getting, or more. Sorry, more than Mackenzie Blackwood is getting right now.
Yeah,
I mean, when you look at that Blackwood deal compared to that Middlestat deal right now,
it's pretty nice. Yeah,
pretty nice. Yeah.
At least it's not too prohibitive to move if they find. I mean, I wouldn't expect a trade either, because that kind of money is tough to move. But maybe at this point, it's a blessing in disguise they didn't sign him long term, because you can at least move a contract with 2 years left instead of 6.
Totally, and that will come to the surface. I think, like, if his struggles continue and we get closer and closer to the deadline, this conversation will become a little more real.
I think they'd love a better fit.
Yeah.
Just in general, like I don't think like one great game changes anything, but I also don't think, like, I've heard this like recency bias or something. Like it's the fit. It's how he plays in this system. It's how he plays the Avs game. It has nothing to do with like a cold streak. It's not about production. So that's why it's not like overreacting to being like, why isn't he scoring goals? Because, well, he doesn't score goals in the first place. But it's not about that. It's about the fit and moving forward, and the fit moving forward.
Totally agree with that. And Megan, we lost you for a second there, so I'm going to head back to you for this next one, which is another player where I'm kind of a little discouraged just based on the fact that we haven't seen Sam Malinski since the Avs played the Rangers on January 14th. We've seen a lot of Middleton and DeHaan in his stead. I know that's when the Will Byram trade, we heard from management that a part of that was the resurgence of Sam Malinski and other young players who were kind of making other older but young players a little more, I guess we could send them on out is what I'm looking for there. But when the dust settles on this deal, or when will the dust settle on that deal, and how does Malinski work into the analysis of that trade?
Yeah, I think with Malinski, it is tough to compare just the draft pedigree of Byram alongside a college free agent. Definitely two things created a bit differently. And so though a 26-year-old player in Malinski, he is new to the league. And even though he has a pro season under his belt, largely at the American League level, I think the rigor of this season playing in NHL games, especially with the scheduling gearing up for the Four Nations break, really jam-packed the schedule ahead, especially in January, December timeframe, with games that I think took a toll on his body that required a little bit of rest. But make no mistake, that New York game was his worst of the season too. And so I think that's a huge component that at the start of this year, Malinski exceeded expectations, I think, in earning a spot right out of camp pretty solidly. And from there, though, because he set this new standard of having exceeded expectations and being able to do so then for a little bit of time, when his game started to teeter off just a little bit, and it coincides with Josh Manson being out of the lineup, Malinski getting promoted to a second pair role and struggling to make an impact there, that's when his game began to fall off just a little bit. I think he's still a player who doesn't harm the team when he's in the lineup, and the defensive part of his game is still relatively sound. But with as much strength as he built this offseason, I think they do want to see him be a little bit more of a physical player and difference maker. And then putting that alongside possible exhaustion with the rigor of this schedule, I think it was just time for Malinski to get a few games off, rest and recuperate, and see what kind of a player they have in Middleton who brings something very different. But also when a Josh Manson isn't playing quite like himself and is not making the best decisions, you want to replenish a little bit of what is being lost from a Manson who's certainly not at 100%. And so I think that the Josh Manson of it all has sort of harmed Malinski a little bit as well. But it all goes back to the standard that Malinski set for himself out of camp and exceeding expectations. Now he has to continue to meet that on a nightly basis. I think that's what they're looking for from him moving forward, because he was able to produce at the NHL level in the few games that he got last year. He was able to get that part of his game to translate. It really fell off from a production standpoint. And if you're going to have the player who's maybe not the most physically imposing but can move the puck well, then you need a little bit of production. And he's shooting the puck, and he's not necessarily making defensive errors, but I think they just want to see him make more of an impact shift by shift, not only physically, but offensively.
Yeah. I think that was the upside for him that stuck out to me, and that I thought, although you're totally right in terms of the draft pedigree, I thought Malinsky's potential offensive upside did make Bo Byram, at least in terms of that play style, like you could potentially still have the young offensive oriented defender on your 6 or 7 D position, and I liked that idea. But I'm wondering, recalling what you had to say about Middlestat, if early on Malinsky was playing on instinct, and then of course you mentioned him being elevated into that basically middle defensive pairing as a result of Josh Manson's absence. But Jackie, I'm really curious as to how you feel about this situation, because I think, like most of the time, you are really our biggest proponent of getting these young guys some experience. What are you seeing in the Malinsky situation, and are you in agreement with Megan as far as how Josh Manson has affected it?
Well, going back to the trade, I didn't believe that he factored into the trade at all. I mean, we spoke all summer about, is he going to get waived or not? And I said, no way, because of his waiver status. And people were still like, well, I don't know. He's supposed to win a job. So, I mean, this is a guy that the Eagles made jerseys for this year. So it has nothing to do with Byram. It's just he's in the bottom pair rotation. And it is interesting about that he set a high standard. I do also think about the production last year. Funny thing is, he's shooting like 1%. When I looked the other day, he had the same amount of shot attempts as Rantanen. So that tells you how much he's shot the puck. But I do think somebody that plays in this system needs to create assists as well, which he's not. But I do think he's on the way out. I think if they want an upgraded defense, he's probably going to be the guy to go. I think they're not going to want to pay him this summer when he has arbitration rights. So, he's in a little bit of a tough spot, I think, because Megan made a good point about how they tried him on the second pair and it didn't work. And I kind of think that's going to be his undoing, really. So I know part of your other question is, how does it factor in the evaluation of the trade? I think what they have to do to get another top 4 defenseman, be it as a rental this year or moving forward in the future, and how they replace Josh Manson, I think, because he only has 1 year left. I think that's going to be a big part of this, because you can't just say, take a top 4 defenseman out of your lineup and then just think that that hole doesn't exist. I mean, exactly. Byram was the number 3 defenseman on this team last year. This year, he's top 15 in 5-on-5 time on ice per game and top 10 in 5-on-5 points per game. So you just don't replace that with like a Sam Malinsky.
Well, and the grit, right? And Megan can vouch for this too. But his grit on the ice he's the only one willing to drop him. The ever so great, not so often. Yeah, it's him and Middleton that are willing to drop him. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. But you get rid of Manson.
Well, I mean, I'm not even suggesting that. I'm saying he's got 1 year left on his contract. Are you giving him an extension, or are you replacing him? I mean, the defense is way more vulnerable than people want to admit. Yeah. You can't just take out a top 4 defenseman and replace it with nothing. And then, like I said, we'll see. What do we have to do for rentals this year? What are we going to have to do in the offseason? What are we going to have to do to replace Josh Manson? So all these questions are coming down the pike, and I just don't think Sam Malinsky is going to be the answer to any of these questions.
Yep. And when we approached the deadline last season, I talked about it like the Avs had talent in their D core to liquidate in order to find that 2C. But you're right, Jackie. I'm feeling now more of the reality of that not being entirely true. And then watching Bo just do what Bo does. Obviously, I know he's draft pedigree again, but we had the guy on our roster. So it does still hurt to kind of see that happening in the midst of what we're seeing with Casey Middlestat. And Jackie, to your credit, you months and months ago gave a season-long prediction that Malinsky would be moved at the trade deadline for a defensive upgrade. So, I mean, you might have saw the writing on the wall a long time ago, which is interesting. But Ezra, I want to talk a little bit about some guys that are going. We've spent a lot of this show on guys that are kind of struggling. I want to talk about some of the good stuff that's happened now. We saw Makar finally get through on the power play for the Avalanche. He scored his 100 and 101st NHL goal. He took a puck to the skate and gave us all quite a fright. Then went back on the ice and scored his 101st goal, and then never sat again on the bench. But of his 101 goals, Ezra, what is your favorite?
Well, it's an easy answer, and I saw that this question was coming to me, so I queued it up. Can we watch it?
Absolutely. Let me bring it up for you.
I have a feeling I know what it is.
We can't do NHL. We'll get shut down.
We'll be all right just for a brief.
I knew it.
Yeah.
It's such an easy answer. I'm so excited to watch this again. Here we go.
McCarr holds in the corner, and now along the half court. Oh, beautiful wheel around move.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness.
You don't see forwards make that play. You don't see that. It's incredible. He's so talented. This goal is just such a clear indicator or a clear demonstration of what separates him from everybody else. Yeah. The skating is incredible. The edge work is incredible. The shiftiness, the move in front of the net to get a backhander top shelf. I mean, man, he is so good. And this, like, there are goals that were more significant. There are playoff goals, sure, but this one, oh my god.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
I believe that goal won him the Norris. I do.
I believe that too, 100%.
I think you're right about that. And I think the kicker in that whole thing is that it's Flower and net, right? And Megan, I'm curious what your reaction is to that as Ezra's favorite goal of Cale Makar's.
I, in looking at the rundown, came up with 3, and that was my first one.
Yep. Yeah.
So I support this.
Yeah. Nice. And I we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the Avs put out their all I think it was century list or something like that. And I think if they did that with goals, this one would be up there in the top 3 as well. So yeah, that's a great pick, Ezra. I'm really excited that you chose that and had it ready to queue up. But Brennan, another person who scored his 100th goal of his NHL career in the same game, which, by the way, that's the first time that's ever happened in franchise history, was one Jonathan Drouin.
The 300th, but yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy, which is 100th. But yes, 2 100 goal scorers in the same game is what hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, but does this performance on the second line with Drouin and Lehkonen in Middlestat, does that give you confidence for Drouin to get away from McKinnon more often?
As long as he stays healthy, yes. But Drouin and McKinnon are the ultimate pair, in my opinion. They always have been, and as long as Drouin's been on the team, I've always been calling for that pair. So, I mean, I don't think they'll get him away from McKinnon, in my opinion.
For too long. Yeah, that's fine with me too, because man, it's just so fun to watch them combine for a goal and think about how long they've been doing that. And we got a comment from Peter, man. Peter, thank you so much for joining. Your usual. He says Belinsky will rebound. No besmirching his name. Fine. We will quiet it down. We will quiet it down.
And Vaguely Sober is a regular of me and Megan's in our comments.
Nice. And I'm gonna say too, yeah, Vaguely Sober
for at least a couple years for us.
Shout out Vaguely Sober. Yeah,
Vaguely's the best.
Look at this. Look at this. I like this proposed stat. Grit per 60. Let's get it going. That's wonderful. So let's move on to our final segment. And folks, thank you so much. Well, not our final, second to last segment, but thank you folks for tuning in. If you are just joining us, we are joined by Meghan Angley today. It's been a wonderful time speaking with her. And I'm with Ezra Parter, Brennan Vogt, Evan Lou, and Jackie K as well. Let's talk about the games that are to come this week between now and our next episode. I'm including the Islanders because I'm not sure if we'll do a Tuesday or a Wednesday show. But let's start with you, Megan. Which matchup are you most keen on? The Jets, Bruins, Rangers, or Islanders matchup? And to expand on that question, maybe if your answer lines up with it, if not, still give us the juicy tidbit. But you guys did an interview on Patrick Wall last time he was in town, and he talked about growing and learning from his time in Colorado. What was that conversation like? And did you have any takeaways from that?
I actually wasn't able to stay for the Watt interview personally, so Guerilla Sports did capture it. But I do think Patrick Watt, since his tenure in Colorado, has been on a bit of a rehabilitation tour to get back to the league, and it's required comments like that
Gotcha.
at least give the appearance of reflection. But I also think today's coaching landscape requires it too. So I'm a bit unsurprised by it. I think that there had to be learning lessons from how his time in Colorado came to an end in order for him to get another job in the league. I think that was sort of a requirement. But awesome. And so I'm looking ahead, and I want the Avs to close out this homestand on a high note against a divisional rival in the Jets tomorrow. So I think that's one that I'm looking at very keenly. But for the road trip ahead, generally, I think that those are each beatable teams. And I'm looking at the New York Rangers game here recently at Ball Arena. They get the points, but I don't like the way the Avs win that game. I don't like the process. And so I'm looking at the Rangers game on this road trip ahead as well as one that I'd like to see them just completely play the game differently. Process-wise, I think that they abandoned some things and some bad habits crept back into their game. And so I want to see them, especially in this back half of the season, begin righting this ship, because there's concerns with the highs and lows of this roller coaster where the team will have a bad game like Chicago, but answer in such a dominant way with the Minnesota game on the road. And so similarly, I felt like Edmonton disappointment. Dallas was a great game, but then they answer with a lukewarm and flat game against, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Minnesota. Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yes.
And so because it fell flat, I think that's what I'm looking for from the team in the road trip ahead, is just a little more consistency in terms of what they're doing, how they're winning games, but even how they're losing. There are different ways to lose a game that you could feel a little more comfortable with, and I haven't felt comfortable lately.
Fair. And like the worst way to lose is giving up 4 unanswered to the Edmonton Oilers. Like that is, you're 100% correct. There are levels to losing. And Ezra, I skipped you, I see in the script, so I'm going to throw this one in real quick to you because I find it interesting that Megan talked.
He disappeared.
Oh, well,
we keep losing people.
Well, let me see if I can get him back on there. Oh, there he is. Look at that. Just in time.
We run into technical difficulties.
We're running into technical. All right, Ezra. It's like the thing knows when I'm about to ask a question.
As long as we have somebody here.
Well, Ezra, I was just going to ask you, Megan talked a little bit about how the Rangers game, she liked the outcome, but she didn't like kind of how it went about. And you were keying on that a little bit last week when you talked about how the Avs you felt were better against Chicago than they were against the Rangers, but they got the outcome against the Rangers and not against Chicago. Are you also kind of ready to, oh, here we go. I'm going to drop the name of the episode. Are you ready to turn the page on the Avalanche's inconsistency?
I'm ready, but that doesn't matter. I hope they are, it's up to them, right? It doesn't matter what I want. I definitely am ready for it. It's been maddening. In my Friday column, and I make predictions every week, and I tend to predict wins because I believe in the team. But even I'm like, well, I got to start going win loss. I'm going to get it wrong, because I like to be right. But it's frustrating. I think the Winnipeg game being the next game after a loss is a good sign for them to maybe shake off that 3-0 loss to Winnipeg from a week ago. With a win, the pattern would hold, right? It would be nice. Losing 2 in a row is when you start really considering how poorly things are actually going. I think if you're just alternating win-loss, it's frustrating, but not the end of the world. Totally. But it would be really good to get them streaking in the win column for a bit. That'd be very nice. And it could start with a little redemption against Hellebuck. I'd love that.
Yeah, I would love that too. And I'm with you. Like, I'm ready for the Avs to turn the page and look like the team that was limiting chances back in 2022 and 23 and 23 and 24, and really helping their goalie out, because like what we saw from the Avs against the Wild was not that. I mean, thank goodness for Mackenzie Blackwood, who basically made 2 save of the year saves in one game, or else that game could have been a little bit uglier. But Evan, let's touch a little bit on getting blanked by the Jets and Connor Hellebuck. Are you nervous? What sort of things need to change when they go into that game in order for the outcome to be a little more pleasing?
Well, they need to score. That hasn't happened on Connor Hellebuck in like 200 minutes or something like that. So that's the easy answer, I guess. But it's also just a matter of I guess, challenging him more, challenging the back line more. I mean, they haven't necessarily done that. They did that when the Jets were there on New Year's Eve, but that wasn't Connor Hellebuck in goal. That was Eric Comrie. So it's possible for sure. I mean, we saw it, last year in the playoffs, right? So and that doesn't go for just Hellebuck. I'm looking ahead to next week when you have the Rangers, Igor Shesterkin, like you have to go at him, right? You have to get pucks to the net, and I think that's kind of been sort of their woes, I guess, recently, right? Because I guess Minnesota, they barely had, I think, 10 shots on goal by the time the second period ended.
Yeah,
in the
I
entire
think they had like
game.
11 shots through the midway through the second period. Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to play first and foremost. You just have to connect and make the right pass, but then also get pucks to the net, because that's something that the Avalanche are sometimes too keen on. Sometimes is making the perfect play, making the perfect pass, and like Megan was mentioning earlier, just the fundamentals, right? Just do what you need to do your job, and that'll at least give you some more success than maybe you had in the past against Hellebuck and the Jets. So
yeah, a lot of people
really just have to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people call that extra passing and looking for the perfect play. They call that like cute, right? And I think that might be the problem on the power play as well, that the Avs are getting a little too cute. Although when they cash in on that cross ice one timer to Rantanen, it's pretty sweet. Same from the point to McKinnon, pretty sweet. It's always awesome when McCarr gets one through. But I just feel like we've touched on this a lot, but that's just not as dangerous as it appears, as it relies so heavily on shooting talent. But we mentioned the number 11. We're going to get an 11 a.m. start against the Boston Bruins and the Rangers, and it'll be a back-to-back, which is crazy. I wrote this question yesterday, Brennan, and I said, why do the Avs play so well in back-to-backs? And then they threw an absolute stinker. So I guess it wasn't a back-to-back, but it was a matinee where they also have success. I said last time that their key to back-to-back success was training and elevation. Is that all you see, or what else could it be?
Well, the fact that they don't have to travel, but at least at the home games.
Yeah.
Yesterday was just wretched. And they didn't wake up. There was no morning skate, at least according to the schedule. And they just couldn't get shots on net.
Right.
And that was the main problem.
And I'm hoping that changes just in all situations. 5-on-5 power play. I've just got to start getting the puck on the net and let guys like Lehkonen and Ross Colton go and do what they do. But speaking of just, the guys that make up the games, Jackie, you're usually pretty privy to the young guns as they pertain to other teams that the Avs might be meeting up with. Of the Jets, Bruins, Rangers, and Islanders, are there any young guns that you're excited about watching?
Well, if I was going to pick someone that I like to personally watch, it would be Lafreniere for the Rangers.
Okay.
I would say Boston and New York they have a few young players. I wouldn't say anybody's really makes a significant impact. There is, I think his name's Will Cooley, the Rangers as well. I don't really like any of Boston's younger players. I would kind of key on is the Avs could be interested in their bottom six. So I'd kind of look for that for maybe deadline options, maybe Trent Frederick, something like that. As far as Winnipeg, I've always said I love Gabe Vilardi. He's one of my favorite players. So I always love watching him, and he usually scores against the Avs, so it happens.
Him and Matt
I know
Duchene.
they have Cole Perfetti as well. He's another decent young player for them. I do expect the Avs to play well against Winnipeg. It follows their pattern of win-loss, and more lethargic effort, a little bit more focused effort. And I always say when you replay a team that you had just played, expect the opposite result.
Yeah.
Minnesota, opposite result. Winnipeg, then it's their turn to win, and it's at home. So I do think we'll see something better as far as like getting more consistent, just in general. I think not burning the top line out, because I don't think you're getting anything more when they played McCarr 30 minutes yesterday.
Crazy.
And I think McKinnon and Rantanen almost 27 minutes. So I just don't think you're getting more. Like, you didn't get another goal out of that. I think that's part of the lethargic, effort, not consistent. It's the middle of the season. It's the doldrums. And when you play guys like that, they're just not going to have it every night. And what gives teams energy? Youth. The Avs don't have youth. So that's another reason.
Yeah, those legs, McKinnon's legs are at least 5 years younger than the rest of his body, though. So, I mean, we got some youth there. At least I'm hoping that's true because he's still got a lot of years left in that contract. But I'm excited to see all four of these matchups. I obviously am also keying on the Jets being the divisional component and the Hellebuck component. I mentioned on our last show, the only way Hellebuck can get real revenge is in a playoff series, but just saying. And I am all about, I hate to be rude, but I'm all about beating up on the Rangers while they're down right now. They're a team that has supposedly been a contender for the last 3 or 4 years, but hasn't gotten to the place to be a contender. So I'm not quite sold on that. I think they aren't quite as good as they thought they were. And you're seeing a little bit of that come to the surface. But I do want to touch on one last thing. Well, two more things, but one thing that's NHL related that I didn't know if I was going to talk about, but I think I do want to talk about it because everyone is, which is the McDavid cross-check and suspension. I am so curious as to, we have our own bias, I think, possibly here because of something that happened just last week with Draisaitl and his stick kind of coming up high against Jonathan Drouin as well. But Megan, I'll start with you. What's your takeaway in terms of the suspension? Is it deserved? And are you on which side of the fence are you on in terms of the standing up for our superstars debate?
Well, I care a lot about player safety. And so the way that I see it is there's obviously a lack of consistency in the Department of Player Safety and how they deal with suspensions. But I am very favorable of a player like even Connor McDavid having the book thrown at them, just because I think even though it's going to be inconsistent, you have to call it. And so doesn't matter who he is. I think this argument that's been born from it too is like we need to protect our league stars from players like Corey Perry is a little bit funny to me. And I get the sanctity of the game. Like it preserves this idea that you need toughness, you need enforcers who are willing to officiate the game of where the officials don't. But I think that because of the game evolving with the speed and the skill that it has, that it's just becoming more and more less necessary, in addition to the Department of Player Safety calling a little bit more than they would have before. And so I think that starts with suspending players, even like Connor McDavid. I still have so many criticisms of how DOTS handles things. So this isn't me aligning myself with the Department of Player Safety, but they made the right call.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I think we could write a book on the things that Department of Player Safety has done or not done that we agree with or don't agree with. I'm with you there, but I do think you're right. Like it's not black and white, but it is. You took a stick to another player's face. Like, and sure, there's an argument to be made about could the play have been, could the whistle have gone and there could have been a penalty on Garland, yada yada yada. But here's the thing: if we're talking about superstars play through the extra attention. That's what makes them superstars. And so I think even if you asked Connor McDavid, he would say, no, please don't give me any preferential treatment, especially when you consider the fact that there is a little bit of a bureaucracy element to hockey that is in no other sport, which is if things don't get settled by the referees, there can be another mode of settling that score. So I think it is a dangerous game to play. Like I'm curious what you think, Ezra. I look at the NFL and I look at Patrick Mahomes and I see how far down the rabbit hole they've gone in protecting that player in specific and how widespread kind of the criticism of that has been. That to me is the slippery slope argument. I know that's kind of a fallacy, but I think it applies here because if you start giving preferential treatment to superstars, guys are going to take matters into their own hands in a way that doesn't happen in other leagues.
Well, Patrick Mahomes is a genius at putting himself in positions to take hits without getting hurt. He's very, very good at it, and he draws flags like nobody else because of that. Yeah. And I think that's those rules are all good and smart for the league because protecting your players who make the most plays, who draw the most audience, is just smart business.
Sure.
And the NHL should be doing that, but they have to do it. It's a totally different sport. You can't make rules specific to positions in hockey. Yeah, except for goaltender, which they should be better. They should be way better.
That, yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about.
I think Megan's got a whole book on that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's so much to say about goalie interference, but let's not do that today. In regard to this McDavid situation, yes, that what Garland did was a penalty. Yes, what McDavid did is a suspendable offense. What What my first reaction to that was, what if this was McKinnon? What would have happened? McKinnon would have dropped the gloves with Garland.
Exactly.
McKinnon would have fought him. He wouldn't have cross-checked him in the face. And I don't want fights. I'm not a guy who calls for fights, but like, if you want to stand up for yourself, you should do it within like the confines of the sports way of being. I know fights are technically illegal, so I didn't say within the rule of the law.
But there's a rule about them because they happen. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, it's disgusting to me that McDavid would make this play, frankly.
Yeah.
I think hitting anybody in the face with your stick ever with force is unacceptable, and he has to be suspended for it. But there's another avenue for him to have gone, and that is challenge Garland to a fight to see what happens. I don't like fighting. I'm not for it, but that's like the right course of action in this situation.
Well, we've seen what McKinnon does in response to Connor Garland. We've also seen what Gabe Landeskog does in response to Connor Garland. So that I'm totally with you there. And Evan, I'm really, really curious what you think, because I don't know if you're like me, but we saw comments from Draisaitl today, and he put himself on the side of the fence where I guess the league just doesn't want their best players on the ice. So is Draisaitl basically saying he's McDavid so he can cross-check someone in the face? Like, I don't know what to take from that kind of dialogue that we're seeing.
I don't know what to take from that either. I mean, I guess, I don't know. First up, complete sidebar. Because, Western New York resident now, go Bills, even though they just beat the Broncos a few weeks ago. That comparison was funny, and that was just the first thing that popped in my head. But I mean, I guess that Draisaitl comment is interesting. I'll admit, I've been running around all day, so I didn't know about this until you literally just told me. But I mean, I'm just kind of along the same boat. Everyone else has just been like, you got to protect the star players, right? You have to protect the integrity of the game, though, right? Mm-hmm. You have to find that sort of middle ground, that balance, right? And yes, business in this sport is about making money at the end of the day, right? And you have to find the way to do it sort of, I guess, in a proper way, but then at the same time also while marketing your best talent and keeping your best talent out there on the ice. That's why Patrick Mahomes, going back to the Chiefs thing, has been so popular in the Kansas City Chiefs. And like, look at Taylor Swift, like the SEO of that is just blowing up, right? Just because of that connection. So, I don't know.
So McDavid just needs to date Tate McRae and we'll be good.
Well, so here's a question though. So, for Megan, because she was in the room and I know for a fact that she was asking the question, to Druin, what was the attitude, like what was the environment with Druin after the hit from Draisaitl,
right?
That game that he sent him down the tunnel,
right? And
I know it was like for a concussion check and things like that, but he still missed time in the game and stuff like that. So what was his attitude and stuff like that? What was the vibe you were getting?
Well, credit to Druin because he's very polished in how he handles media, but this actually didn't really come up. I think because it was a loss that the focus was elsewhere. However, it would be a great practice question for Druin because he's pretty candid on practice days. He's admitted to hating the practice jerseys this year or that goalie interference call earlier in the year. Druin was pretty candid about how that didn't feel like very much contact, and it's been inconsistent with how goalie interference has been otherwise called. So to that end with Draisaitl, I imagine he would be candid if we asked about it now after it happened. I think the post-game locker room, the setting was not right because that was a tough room.
Frustrated room, I imagine, after that outcome.
Definitely.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of why I mentioned that, because I think if you look at this like an isolated incident in terms of McDavid and his suspension, I think you're being willfully blind, because the Edmonton Oilers have kind of been gooning it up a little bit for a couple of weeks. And I don't think that there's nothing necessarily wrong with that to a point. I think they understand that levels of that are required in the playoffs, and I think they're trying to train themselves to get there mentally. I just feel like it's January though, so like let's pump the brakes a little bit on it. But that's just my opinion, which is worth a bucket of spit. But that's where I'm at, and I think we can move on from this conversation because I think we all agree that he got suspended and he deserved to, which is pretty much all that comes down to there. But let's talk about the all-century team. Is that what it was, or what was it? What was it called? I keep
quarter century.
Quarter century. I mean, I guess it could be a century team since they've only been around for a quarter century and some change. But we had on our first group, I think there was 2 teams. The first team was Forsberg, McKinnon, and Sakic with Foote. And who else was on and Makar. And I think that was, they didn't do goalies. Or did they do a goalie?
Yeah, Patrick Waugh.
Okay, well then Patrick Waugh, of course. So that's your first 5. And then I didn't see the second 5. Who did they have in their second 5?
Here, I got it right in front of me, so I can share it. The second team was Milan Hajduk, Landeskog, Rantman, Rob Blake, Eric Johnson, and Semyon Varlamov.
Varley, is there any changes? I'll open this up to the whole group. Just make it known that you're about to answer. Is there anyone in these groups that you would maybe change?
I'm not a Foote truther, so that wouldn't be my pick.
I'm the same, and I don't know if my pick would be more controversial because everyone gives us crap for having Ray Bourque in our rafters, but I would probably put Ray Bourque there. Am I crazy?
I mean, I understand. Yes, I would. I guess I'll say this. I understand why Ray Bourque is not on this list, right? Why he's not a part of this team. But he is also the one that won the Stanley Cup with the Avalanche and has his most prized possession and like best cup handing over process that's probably ever happened, right? Like it's very memorable, and I don't know, at least I think we are all biased here, right? Of like, that's what makes him more memorable as an Avalanche versus a Bruin, but he also played 1,500 games with Boston Bruins. So take it with a grain of salt.
Fair. I think that makes sense. And Footer is like the culture, right?
I mean, is that really the best defense that we've had for 25 years? Isn't that a little sad?
I would put, I don't know, but like the Avs first 5, I mean, maybe outside of Foote. If you swap Ray Bourque for Adam Foote, that 5 probably at least has a great game with any 5 you can put together in the history of the NHL, which is pretty crazy. When you put it in that perspective. The other one I was thinking about, which Megan, maybe you can touch on this little bit of goalie guru. What about Varley? Is there anybody else besides Varley that you could have contemplated on that second team?
No.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. I was gonna say, how do cups weigh into the equation? Because I know Varley, he had a Vezina year. Kind of
did.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. Is that what outweigh the I guess Stanley Cup success of Kemper and obviously longevity, I assume?
It's funny because as you said, I'm like more open to consider Francouz there than instead. And I think the cup absolutely is weighted in some of this. I think that is how a lot of these decisions were made. And I don't know that I can buy Kemper over Varley just in terms of goalie impact. I think back to Varley's early impact on some of the most struggling Avalanche teams and being able to help sort of put this core as we know it today on the right track by giving them some decent goaltending. Yeah. I think that's important from Varley's perspective. And if not for injuries, probably that's a silly thing. You know what? I'm not even going to go down.
Well,
it's kind of funny that they were so quick to move on from him. He's played like 10 years since then.
Yeah.
And he's the second best goalie the Avs have had, according to them.
I think you bring up a good point, which is like the lore of Avalanche history. And that seems to be what's most considered here. Like Foote is kind of the heartbeat of that era of the Avs in terms of like he was just your grinded out kind of guy. Not to mention his role in the Detroit Red Wings rivalry and how not many people remember this, but it all started with a hit on Foote, not with the Draper hit. And that whole era and how that fits into the lore of Colorado Avalanche, I think is important. So I get it. Same
Imagine
with
if that hit never happened.
I'm sure Draper wishes sometimes it did, but at the same time, man, what great competitive hockey that made for in the Western Conference.
Like a decade.
Yeah, which they would have been good otherwise, though. So there's that too.
That was before my time, of course. But I mean, the the videos of that, I mean, just ridiculous.
I
But
think
I
that-
will get. I
Yeah,
will say
think
this.
that was before all y'all time, except for
Yeah.
me and Jackie.
Yeah. I was
Maybe.
around. What are you talking about?
Well, no, I think Megan would have been like 3.
Yeah, I was. Let's see, what was that? I was 7, dude. Come on.
Here, but before we move on, I do
child.
want to give a couple of other shout outs that I
Yeah.
think could make this list. Because if we're talking like just
honorable mentions.
Yeah, like honorable mentions and like, people that Avalanche fans just kind of generally enjoy, he probably wouldn't make this list at all. But I'd maybe give a shout for Peter Budaj. Like,
Yeah, that was my
he's
name.
stuck around with at least the organization. Of course, is with the Eagles nowadays. He probably doesn't make the list, but
he's with the Ducks.
Oh, he moved on now.
Yeah.
Oh, my mistake.
Got an NHL goalie job.
Yeah.
There you go. And I'll also give a shout out to Altitude TV analyst John Michael Lyles because he's a good defender. He was
as he gets knocked down the list,
and that was going to be my point, is that he was probably up there for one of the better Avalanche defenders until Cam McCarr showed up. So
yeah,
I mean, regardless of, if we're talking fan favorites, I do love the fact that Erik Johnson made it.
Yes.
I don't know if talent wise, but I mean, he was won a Stanley Cup. He stuck around through injury and concussion and really battled through and went through hell and back with the Avalanche, to be quite frank. So I'm happy that he made the list. And I mean, he gave his pleasantries on Twitter about it too, thanking the team, of course. So I can't wait for him to be back in Colorado eventually in some capacity.
And speaking of Erik Johnson, have you guys realized he's played one game since his game against the Avs?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. That's interesting.
Well, and Megan, your professional opinion about EJ, since you've actually interacted with him. And
well, we kind of talked about culture and foot, and that's a huge part of EJ, and why I think having the goalie switch and having vocal guys who can keep it light in the room is a huge thing. That's definitely an absence that is felt from Erik Johnson. I also think early version of Erik Johnson was a better skilled player than the way his time in Colorado had ended. His role changed from being considered in a top 4 role to bottom pair defenseman pretty solidly. And so I think, though, that evolution of his role deserves some credit in how he started in the Avs tenure following that trade. And I think longevity also factored into how some of these decisions were made. And so that's why a Darcy Kemper isn't really on front of mind. But an EJ is 13 seasons with the Avs, gets a cup in the end. I think that another guy who at his kind of peak was a stabilizing factor in how the D pairs were set from the top pair down, at least in early iterations of the team.
Totally. And what's funny is you mentioned that EJ was more of kind of an offensive, had more offense to his game earlier on in his career. And my brother, famously in my family, was not big on Erik Johnson in his early days because how much he shot the puck. He used to say, if Erik Johnson gets the puck, he's going to shoot, kind of like people say about Middleton right now. But he grew on my brother throughout the years as his role changed into that bottom 6. And I jokingly gave my brother an autographed signed picture of Erik Johnson this year for Christmas. And he let out quite a chuckle. And he said, actually, I think he's one of my favorite after all is said and done. And wouldn't you know, he's on the second team. So he's among many favorites. I think one of the other people I might add or think about adding is Tanguay. But you run out of space with just 10 places, and 6 forwards. So I get it. I think we got
I wrote about it in the little press release that about it this morning on milehighhockey.com. But I mean, it just shows how good the Avalanche have had it really in their relatively short history. You've got, we haven't even mentioned correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Oslin, Sandus Oslin or something like that.
Oslin. Because you were so young.
Thank you, Brennan. I know I'm the baby.
This started in 2000 onward, and I feel like Ozolinch was
Ozolinch was in the
early all Avalanche team. Ozo would be on there for sure, but all century doesn't. He wasn't here.
Yeah, that's good.
Regardless, it just shows that the Avalanche have had some really great talent, and we've been pretty fortunate in that.
If it's all century, I think maybe it should kind of lean more towards current than past, because you're cutting off 5 years of the glory years from when the Avs first arrived. So I know that people would say it's like recency bias or whatever, like you're only counting on these guys, but if you're only taking, because the fall off was quick in the 2000s, so I would argue that this era has been more robust than what we've seen from 2000 and on. So even though I'm not his greatest fan on the earth, I think Tays probably should be in the top 4 defense, because looking back, I think you're going to say that his contributions were probably more than some of the guys that were on the list.
Yeah,
I might be his greatest fan on the earth. I completely agree. But what's funky is like, would you bump Blake off of the second team? No, you have to bump Foot off the first team and move Blake up to make room for Taves. It's
Well, that's okay.
Well,
I wouldn't put Foot
I'm
on
good
my
with that
first
too.
team.
And that leads to a good segue for my question is that so there's been debate on whether Kale, I mean, this is complete hypothetical, and I never want to see this, but if Landy were to retire, God, I would hate it. But if Landy were to retire, would Kale or Tays get the captaincy, Megan?
That's a great question, because Taves is a pretty big voice in the room. It's maybe not as apparent to the public view of how he leads, but I think Kale is still the more well-rounded leader of the two.
Plus, he doesn't sit on the floor.
He's not a floor sitter. No, I think Taves probably has a more stern approach to his leadership than Kale, though. So depending on the needs of the team, that could be valuable. But I'm leaning Kale.
I'm leaning Kale too, if I get to answer that question.
Okay.
I think
it is a little bit of a PR thing too, so it's Kale.
Kale's got those rosy cheeks, and he just looks so good when he's giving an interview, man. He just looks so happy every time. It's perfect. It's perfect.
I'd like to throw one more name out.
Okay.
I know it's not going to be a popular opinion.
Not Nate.
But
JT Comfer.
No, it is not Nate. Miko.
Yeah.
He's been in a lot of captain positions with Team Finland. I know this assumes that he signs the deal.
I was going to say, you got to sign him first.
I think we can assume that.
But I think he gets discounted. I don't know in these conversations. I don't if it is because of the contract and this that. Okay, it's fair that if he's not here, he's obviously not going to be the captain. But if we're talking about him and his merits, I mean, 2 years ago he did a lot of the media and the speaking and the the accountability, I think, aspect for it. So I think at least he should be in the conversation.
And Vaguely Sober actually brings up a good point too.
LOC
after
work?
Yeah.
Logan O'Connor. I think Logan strikes me as more of the Calvert, like, do it fresh out of the box and get a goal in the Western Conference Final and look at the bench and go, see, that's what happens when you grind. But I don't know if he's
I think to me it has to be someone that already has a letter. Like,
I think it's fair.
First and foremost, the most important thing is what the guys in the room believe. But if we're having a conversation about this, I think you have to have a letter first, and there's a reason why those 3 guys have the letter right now. And so I think for me, it would either be Kale or Miko for captain, in my opinion.
That's interesting too, because how does that work into the contract itself? Because if you're Miko and you say, I want to be your next captain when Gabe retires, how does that work into kind of like, because in that sense, the announcement would be pretty cool. Hey, we've re-signed Mikko Rantanen for 8 years after knowing Landeskog is retired. And guess what? Mikko's our new captain too. I think that looks well optically too. But I guess Makar's due pretty soon here to get his real payday as well, which kind of lines up with that.
20 mil.
Yeah.
Oh boy, heaven help us.
Yeah.
And that brings me up to the next one, Megan. your opinions on the Rantanen situation.
Chris McFarland tampered expectation earlier in the season that this wasn't going to get done anytime soon, but he also made it sound like it wouldn't drag out too long into the regular season. So to that end, I think it's been a little confusing, but I also think it's going as best as it could. Like, I'm not concerned that it hasn't happened yet. I still think that it can. I think that between the Draisaitl contract, it just sort of gave Rantanen different leverage. in terms of his performance this year, I think that it's pretty much on par with what I would have expected. I think, some of those early season hat tricks have probably helped to bolster his case, but I still don't think my opinion of where Rantanen goes has changed much over the course of the regular season. I still think they're going to keep him a part of this team, and it's based on what Rantanen has said, how he's talked about the value of playing for a team he believes can win, and it has been consistent that he believes that's in Colorado because he's done it in Colorado. And I also we laugh about the Finnish mafia, but the influence that Rantanen has had on some of the decisions that the team makes in terms of players, personnel, that kind of thing, he holds influence, and it's not him alone. It's, shared with McKinnon too, but I just think those things hold too much value, that he's invested in this team, I think, in ways that people don't fully appreciate, that I think he's going to continue to be a part of this core. I'm not too worried about it, but we might be a little surprised by how much he makes.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where
more than McKinnon.
I think he will. I think he will, just based on just how the market itself is changing, not based on how he compares to McKinnon. They're so different in terms of many ways and how they play the game. I don't think it's a fair comparison to start with, but I'm with you. I think he'll probably come up in the $13 million area, but that's fine with me, with the cap going up $5 million potentially between now and next year. So you're making up some cash there. And I like what you have to say about the Finnish mafia, because like one of the Avs, if not the most consistent player, has been Arturi Lehkonen since his arrival here in Colorado. He's made his mark in the playoffs. He's made his mark in big regular season games. And even Bednar mentions him and Logan O'Connor are the guys that you can count on to give 110% every single night. So I like that. I agree with you. I do think he's invested. So thank you, folks. There's 255 of you right now watching live. So thank you so much. We are going on a little bit long. I hope that's okay, Megan. I do want to get your bold predictions before we let you go. Is that cool?
It is cool. I might need some guidance. I did not prepare any.
That's okay. So the way this works,
just go with your gut.
Yeah,
what do you think? Pick something that you think is going to happen within like the next week, the games that we talked about.
Yes.
Just go with your gut. Anything, like, could be anyone to score a goal, or anything that would happen Avs related that you kind of
or Eagles.
Ado said last week that they would have a shutout and a hat trick in the same game against the Dallas Stars. So that's how ridiculous it can get.
Yeah, so there's no pressure to be right. None of us ever have been.
Except for Evan this week.
Except for me.
I was going to say, we have some dings to give out.
No,
I don't have a ding. I don't know what Ado's talking about.
Let's hand out those dings and X's real quick before we play the track. So last week, Ezra, you said Shillington would be back in the lineup. That didn't happen. So,
he's back in practice.
Jackie, you said Ivan will be back this week. You're the one who gets a ding. There you go.
I know it's fairly easy, but
I don't know.
Especially after watching him that one game that you were up in Loveland with me.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I said that the Avs would have a shutout and a hat trick against the Dallas Stars. They didn't, but I mean, I really like the way that went. They won by 3 goals. Evan, you had Scott Wedgwood returning this week, so you did get a ding, my friend.
Yeah, but I also added on that he'd give up 2 goals or less.
Yeah, but I didn't hold you to that because you just did it because you thought it wasn't bold enough. But I think it was that you.
Guilty.
I know one of you mentioned that he would play Dallas because that's who he used to play for.
Yeah.
I think. Was that Evan?
I said that he was going to get the win because that's who he played for.
And then Brandon, I blame you for the comeback loss.
Hey, he only had 2 points. Come on,
McDavid would have 1 point. How dare you? So that's the dings and X's last week. Let me play that track, and you think about your bold predictions this week. Megan, we'll get yours first.
All right. I think Yusuf Parson.
Go ahead.
Yusuf Parsonen, another goal on the road.
I don't
think that's very bold, but just enough.
I think it's pretty.
I think it's bold enough for sure.
So let's look at because he has what, maybe 1, 2.
I think he has
right
a
now?
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has 3 goals in 26 games played. So he doesn't have one in his last.
He only has 1 point for the Avs.
6 games. So I like it. That's plenty. He hasn't scored a goal since January 8th, Megan. That's plenty bold, if you ask me. We will get you down. And if you earn your ding next week, we'll be sure to send you a clip and be like, Megan, you did it. Congratulations. Evan, what do you got for me, Mr. Managing Editor?
I finally get some normal start times out here in the middle of nowhere, New York. So I'm looking forward to that, even though I'll be on a ski slope with our ski team both days, but that's besides the point. So I'll base my bold predictions around that. I think they're going to sweep the road trip. I like what Megan said about, these are 3 winnable games and they're good teams to kind of show your stuff against, right?
Yeah.
Big market teams. So I'm hoping that they pull that off because, I feel like we talk about it every week. It's another important stretch of games when the Avs need all the points they can get.
I love it. Plus, like you say, over there on the East Coast, and McKinnon and Makar, and heck, even Mackenzie Blackwood now putting up some cases for season-long awards, and doing so in time zones where you can actually be watched on the West Coast. It's beneficial, so that'll be cool. I guess this won't satisfy that, but those 11 o'clock games will. That'll be fine. Ezra, what do you got for me this week?
I'm going to say the second line trio, Drouin, Middlestat, and Lehkonen combined for 2 or more points every game.
I love it. Is there a way we can
every
combine?
Game?
Wow, yeah. The Avs might have to send you a gift if that happens.
I'm not saying that all 3 of them are on the ice for all these points. I'm just saying the players.
Okay. Can we combine their names like we did the Logan O'Connor Wood line? Is it possible?
Oh, yeah. Logan O'Coltonwood was really fun.
Logan O'Coltonwood.
Let's say it's
Drudel
the leftovers.
Johnny Middleton.
Yeah, Johnny Middleton. I like that one. There it is.
I don't care. I just want McRentonskog back.
McRentonskog. Yeah. Oh,
3-headed monster.
Yeah. All right, Brandon, what you got for me?
So the Eagles played the Silver Knights this weekend, and Silver Knights are in 10th place in the division with 24 points to the Eagles 46. So I'm calling for a sweep.
Eagles sweep. Love it. I love it when you do an Eagles one because then I have to go. Then I get
you actually have to pay attention.
Exactly. Then I go pay attention and I'm like, whoa, this is actually awesome. Every single time I watch one of those games, I'm like, what the heck? Why do I not watch this more often? It's just because my eyeballs only have so many hours.
I can make an AHL fan out of all y'all.
I love it. So we're getting an Eagles sweep. We're getting a sweep on the road trip, a Parsonen road goal. And we got a second line trio combining for 2 points in every game until next show from Ezra. That is going to be
one from Vegas Silver in the chat too.
Oh yeah, nice. Let's see. What do we got here?
I put it up.
Oh, beautiful. Blackwood doesn't give up more than 2 goals in any of the games. There's mine. I dig it. He has only done it once, so I mean, it's a prediction. I like it. It's a bold hope, as we say around here. So I got you, Ezra. Jackie, what do you got for me?
Let's see. Keeping on the Eagles theme, so I kind of have 2. Keeping on the Eagles theme, Shillington's next game will be in Loveland, whenever that may be. Might not be this week. I don't think he's practiced with the team yet.
Jerseys.
Yeah.
So whenever that happens, I almost didn't mention it because I really am not sure it's going to happen this week, but we'll just let that one ride. But
I'll practice with the team, but in a red no contact jersey.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think he's had like a practice.
No.
So I'm going to pull back one from a couple weeks ago. I really do feel like it's going to be time soon for a Sam Girard goal. But you know what? It would be even bolder to predict a Sam Alinsky goal. Yeah. Because then A, he'd have to be playing, and B, he'd have to actually score. But can I have a dual Sam?
Yes.
Can I have a dual Sam?
Yeah. Sam will score.
I love it.
Score. I like it a lot.
Well, and like you have to love the Sam Girard goals because he always gets so excited.
Oh, and Sammy smoked.
Well, they're always like huge goals. They're never like inconsequential goals. They're always like huge. They're like win a game or whatever.
I mean, don't let this affect your guys' approach to this segment, but every time you guys give me a bold prediction, I go put some skin on the game because I feel like it'd be hilarious to get some action. And like Sammy G, I had for a goal, anytime goal scorer, Jackie, because of your prediction.
Hey,
And
I
he
have
just-
been right on ones before. I would have
He
won
was
you
so
money.
close, though. He had a great look, and he just absolutely smashed the crossbar. And I was like, oh, well, there goes that. If that was the chance, that's
I
where
think
he
it's
was gonna
coming.
score.
I think he's due. He got an assist yesterday.
Mhm.
I really do think he's
I
due.
like-
It's coming.
I-
and like I mentioned with Malinsky's shooting 1%. Like the guy is going to score a goal soon.
And that's bold. So I'm just gonna put it down as Sam will score a goal. That's how
Okay.
we're gonna
All right.
write
I'll
it.
take it.
Perfect. Okay, and then that's it for this week's bold predictions. But Megan, one last thing. I want a season-long bold prediction. So something that's going to happen before season's end that you think is kind of bold. For example, Brennan's is that Landeskog will come back and will have 15 goals.
Wow, you could have just stopped it. Let the struggle come back. Go that crazy with
To
it.
be fair, that was made in September.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
I am just hoping now that Landy comes back, but
we can't revise.
I know.
I'm sorry,
I know.
Brennan.
I know.
Sorry.
We can't change it.
All right, Megan, what you got for me?
All of mine feel kind of negative, so I'm trying to think of something that will not be negative.
You can join me in the negativity. It's okay.
We got a good balance around here. It's just all about a balance.
I don't think Miles Wood will play for the Colorado Avalanche.
Wow.
Again?
Like again, either because he's traded or because he's like it's just the recovery is going to be that long.
I think the recovery is the issue, but I also don't. I think he'll be traded.
Wow. Okay.
His
Okay. Yeah.
In his returning role, I just see fourth line opportunity in his future, and I don't see the money making sense for a fourth liner if that's
totally, or the term. But
well, I like that. That's a bold one.
I love that one actually.
If that one comes true, that would definitely be big time credit.
That's like on no one's radar.
We need
right
500 to 700 words on that on your website.
Now. Exactly. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been an awesome show. Thank you, Megan, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you. Great insight from you. We'll hope to have you back again sometime. And of course, we'll get you your ding or your X next week, depending on how that bold prediction sorts out. But on behalf of myself, Ezra Parter, Brennan Vogt, Evan Liu, Jackie K, and Meghan Angley of Guerilla Sports, this has been the Mile High Hockey Lab. Please head on over to milehighhockey.com to check out all things Colorado Avalanche on the website. And just know that we love and appreciate all of you folks for tuning into the program. Until next time, go Colorado Avalanche.
Thank you for tuning into the Mile High Hockey Lab.